According to the United States Treasury, in early 2024, a group calling itself the Cyber Army of Russia Reborn was able to interfere with human-machine interfaces at water facilities in both the US and Poland, as well as disrupt operations at a facility in France, the country hosting the 2024 Olympic Games. The group's ability to compromise the industrial control systems that control water storage tanks in Texas also led to the loss of thousands of gallons of water. Here's Fox News.
This is cyber warfare, period. Russia's been after America and us and our infrastructure for an extremely long time. The underground IRC chats suggest, and this is Kremlin who's responsible for this, that this is one of many. So what did they do? They went out to a town, a small town that has 5,000 population, Muleshoe, and what did they do? They exploited Muleshoe, and as a result, they released it so the world could see, making a mockery out of the cyber defenses, right? Mm-hmm. So this is one of many. Now, this is politically charged. We must know that. They say it's Kremlin, but it's actually Russia, okay, and their government, tapping on our door saying, look what we can do from a cyber perspective.
The United States Treasury also said in its press release that Cyber Army of Russia Reborn compromised its supervisory control and data acquisition or SCADA system of a U.S. energy company, giving them control over the alarms and pumps for tanks in that system. And in early May, someone affiliated with the group had developed training materials on how to compromise SCADA systems in the United States and other countries, and was possibly looking to distribute those materials to external groups. The U.S. government introduced sanctions against various named members of the Cyber Army of Russia Reborn, some of whom have connections to the Lockbit ransomware group. In many ways, targeting these small utilities is like targeting OT devices in the field. We don't talk about the small utilities much, and so their security practices might be less robust than a larger system. And it's the not having the knowledge or the resources to address a crisis that is making them suitable targets for others. This is a story about people who are trying to educate small utilities with best practices and provide them with tools so that they don't become training grounds for foreign adversaries. I'm Robert Famosi. This is Error Code.
I am Dawn Capelli, Director of OT-CERT at Dragos. Dragos is an industrial cybersecurity company, and our mission is safeguarding civilization, which we take very, very seriously.
You may remember that I talked with another member of Dragos, Leslie Carhart, in episode 37, regarding digital forensics on OT systems. Dawn works at Dragos as well, and before joining, she worked at Rockwell Automation. So I wanted to pick her brain about OT security. Except, what is Director of OT-CERT?
OT-CERT stands for Operational Technology Cyber Emergency Readiness Team. And our mission in OT-CERT is to provide free resources for small and medium organizations that have OT, operational technology environments. Think of manufacturing, water, power, oil and gas, chemical, all of those kinds of organizations that they don't have the financial resources or the expertise that they need to build, to secure their plants, their operational technology environments, but yet they're part of critical infrastructure around the world. They're part of our economy around the world. And so they need protecting. And because of our mission, safeguarding civilization, that's what we do. We give them free resources to do that.
So I wonder if Dawn could give me an example of a small to medium-sized utility. Because when I think about critical infrastructure, I think of large utilities. I think of large manufacturing floors. But how would you define small and medium in that context?
So small utilities, we also have another program called the Community Defense Program. And that program we define very concretely as any utility with under $100 million in revenue, water, power, and gas. Any utility of that size, they can get our platform for free, same platform that our large customers use. They get our threat intelligence, they get threat hunts, and they get our educational resources totally free. So that's how we define small for community defense program. It's kind of hard to define what is medium, but OT-CERT, while we say that our target is to help small and medium organizations, we found that we have a lot of large, very large companies that are members of OT-CERT, because although they have a robust OT cybersecurity program, the resources we're providing are really good. And so why not use them? They're free. And they're really good, so they use them as well.
And just to be clear, OT-CERT, that's not part of the U.S. CERT program, is it?
It is not associated with any other certs. It is just Dragos OT-CERT.
So Dawn would be helping out like a small town as opposed to a large municipality.
If you look at some of the attacks that have been happening recently, the cyber army of Russia reborn, they just compromised 2 small water facilities in Texas, very small. Those would be ideal customers for OT-CERT. The Cyber Avengers in November, they compromised at least a dozen small municipal water authorities in the U.S. and in Europe as well. They would qualify for the Community Defense Program, probably. They'd have to have under $100 million in revenue. But those are the kinds of utilities that would qualify.
In addition to the community work, Dawn also does training.
Yes, and the fun thing about OT-CERT is we realize these are small organizations, and this is scary to them. They don't know how to do OT security. They may not even know how to do IT security. So we can't just be a library where they go and they check out the book and now they're on their own to figure it out. So we meet with them once a month. We call them our monthly working sessions, and they come together and we'll give them a preview of a new resource we're going to release, or we'll just have conversations. They'll ask questions and they learn from each other. So they say, hey, we used this OT-CERT resource in this way and it worked really well. And then we record those tips and tricks and we make them available on our OT-CERT portal so that they can all learn from each other. So that's kind of, to me, that's my favorite day of the month, is our monthly working sessions.
With RSAC being what it is, I missed Dawn's presentation that morning. Here she was saying the challenges are in the skills gap. How acute is the skills gap?
It's very acute, especially in small organizations, because there's a shortage of security people in general. There's really a shortage of people that understand operational technology and security. And the people that do have those skills, they're not going to go to a small water utility, because in a small water utility or a small electric, like a rural electric association, believe it or not, they one person is the IT person, the security person, and they cut the grass, literally. And so that is not the kind of job that someone with an OT security background is going to go after. That's why OT-CERT, we take this mission very seriously, and we have those working sessions. Every time we put out a new resource, we meet with them, we explain it to them, and we have these subject matter experts from Dragos that create the resources, come to the working session. So these small companies are getting direct access to the best cybersecurity experts in the world, these people from Dragos. So it's really, it's a very cool program.
So even though these utilities are small, they're going to be the ones having very similar technology that you would find in a larger metropolitan or larger utility.
For the most part, but they probably have a lot of older equipment. Just recently, the Cyber Avengers, which the U.S. government linked with the government of Iran. So the Cyber Avengers is a hacktivist group, but they're working with the government of Iran. They attacked these small municipal water authorities, and the reason was that they were attacking any company that had PLCs made by Israel exposed to the internet, because this was a pro-Hamas hacktivist group. So chances are we didn't see any large utilities being attacked, but these smaller utilities had these PLCs exposed to the internet with default passwords just sitting there wide open. So, they have legacy equipment. They may not go for the high-end equipment that the larger companies go for. The larger companies, they can look for OEMs that take security seriously. It's worth paying more to get secure products. But the smaller utilities don't have that luxury.
So Dawn's identified a couple different attacks in just a few minutes here. How often would these attacks occur? In other words, is Dragos seeing the frequency increase so that this is like becoming a new playground, or is it a constant background noise and we've just started paying attention to it?
It's happening more frequently. Just in the past 2 years since the Russia-Ukraine war started, we talked in the past, Russia attacked the Ukraine power grid twice years ago. And there was all this discussion about, if they attack the U.S. critical infrastructure, what will we do? Will it be an act of war? How will we react? Well, now all of a sudden that line is being crossed repeatedly. And okay, so it's a hacktivist group, but they're aligned with a nation state. And so the number of attacks is increasing. The number of threat groups that are willing to carry out these attacks is increasing. And I haven't talked about China yet, but that's another threat that's been escalating over the past few years. A group that we call VoltSite, which others call Volt Typhoon, linked by the U.S. government with China. Dragos, there was a medium-sized utility that installed Dragos platform, and they enlisted our threat hunting service. And so we found that they had been compromised by VoltSite over 300 days earlier. And the scary thing is that a lot of times ransomware will compromise your IT and move into OT. If you don't secure it, just happens to move in there. Well, this time, VoltSite deliberately went from IT into the OT environment, and they didn't steal like personally identifiable information, health information. What they stole was information about their asset configurations in the OT environment. They stole information about how their operations work. How does this utility produce their power? And they stole critical customer lists. That one in particular really worries me because we have an OT-CERT member that's a medium-sized water utility, and they service a military base. So the Department of Defense came into them recently and said, if you get compromised and you're taken down, our military base has no water, and we need water. So we really need to look into your cybersecurity posture, IT and OT. So why would China steal those critical customer lists from a medium-sized utility? It kind of gives you some insight into what they're doing. They're choosing utilities that have critical customers. They don't care about so much maybe about taking out a medium-sized water utility, but what's the impact going to be? So once we saw that activity in this utility, we knew what to look for. We knew what their tactics were. We knew what behaviors to look for. So we built that into our platform, and our threat hunters did threat hunts in all of our customer environments that permit us to, as well as what we call neighborhood keeper. But this way we found more victims. So they are preparing probably for something down the road. And they're not just targeting large utilities and large companies. They're targeting medium, at least medium as well, if not small.
It sounds like a supply chain attack in the sense that a utility opens the door to the true target, or maybe the target further down the pipeline.
Right. And that's what we need to get people thinking about. That's what we need to get all of us thinking about. Like, we're all in one big ecosystem and we have to look out for each other. That was the whole purpose of my presentation at RSA. You have to join our mission. You have to help us to get the word out there and to work with the smaller companies to help them to start to protect themselves.
Dawn mentioned the Neighborhood Keeper program. What's that?
Neighborhood Keeper was funded by the Department of Energy. It's a collective defense program. So the way it works is our customers can opt in if they choose. The community defense program participants are automatically opted in. And the way it works is it sends anonymized data from the Dragos platform to the Neighborhood Keeper program. So we don't know who you are, our participants. We deliberately engineered it so that we can't reverse engineer. If the FBI comes with a subpoena and says, who is this organization? We can't tell them. It's not possible. But we do know what sector they're in, and we know what region of the country they're in. So think about that Cyber Avengers attack on like 12 small water utilities. If they had been in community defense program, they would have been in Neighborhood Keeper, and somebody could have detected, hey, look, there's this threat in 12 different small, they don't know the size, 12 different water utilities across the U.S. We can see the threats. We can see vulnerabilities. That's what we can see. We can see it. CISA can see that data, the Department of Energy, some ISACs. So, if you're in a small water utility and you're the guy that cuts the grass on Wednesday and something happens on Wednesday, there's someone else who has your back, who can see that. So what do you do about it? We can reach out to them through Neighborhood Keeper and say, look, I don't know who you are, but you have a threat in your environment, and so do other organizations. We're going to all get on a call at 3:00 today. If you want to participate, send us your email address. Tell us who you are. But it's still under their control, and it's up to them if they want to do that or not. But it's a pretty neat way of us all to work together and to try to strengthen that ecosystem.
Dawn mentioned that the platform is free for the community if they meet certain criteria. What other resources might be available to them?
Yeah, well, through OT-CERT, I've looked several times and said, are we reinventing the wheel? Like, CISA now puts out information, resources for small and medium organizations. Are we doing something different? And we are. What we found was other organizations tell them what to do. We give them the how. So we give them tools and templates. We give them a tabletop exercise that they can run themselves. Ransomware hits your OT environment. We give them the whole deck that we could charge them to do, but we give it to them for free. We have demonstration videos. So one of the things that we find a lot if we go into an organization, especially a smaller one that's been hit with an attack, they don't have any logs. And if you have no logs, then you can't figure out what happened, how'd they get in, what did they do? And if you don't know that, then it's just going to happen again. So we have these demonstration videos where literally we just are showing them on our screen. Click here, type this, check these 3 boxes, copy and paste this out of our guide, and you're ready to go. So I'm really excited about those educational. It's not educational, it's really practical job aids that they can just take and implement. Building OT cyber incident response plan. We give them a workbook. It's just a collection of tables. Fill in these tables, and if you get hit, you can pull it out and you'll know exactly, like, who do I need to call? How long do I have? What's the email address or the phone number of the person that I need to call? Regulators, customers, law enforcement. They'll have it all right there at their fingertips.
So this sounds like it would be an IR practice.
Yes, that particular resource. Yes.
So I'm curious, how did Dawn become a part of this organization and follow its cause?
Well, for me, I became interested in this because I was the CISO at Rockwell Automation, and we started getting letters in like 2019 when ransomware became more prevalent. We started getting letters from small suppliers saying, we were hit with ransomware. We have no idea how long it'll take to recover. It'll be at least a month before we can get you our product. And I realized, geez, I never thought of these suppliers. They don't present a cyber risk to Rockwell, but we could have to shut down our plants if one of our critical suppliers got hit, and we weren't prepared. So we started doing assessments, working with the OT, the supply chain organization. I said, just give me your top 25 critical suppliers. And then we went out and we did assessments of their cybersecurity posture. And if they were large, they certainly had IT security. They would have some level of OT security. It varied. But the smalls and mediums, some of them had no IT security and none of them had OT security. So then we went to the next 25 and it just same thing. So I kept saying, somebody has to help these people. There are free resources for building an IT security program, but there was nothing out there for OT, for small and medium. So that's how OT-CERT, that's how I became involved in OT-CERT. I kept saying, somebody has to help these people. And then our CEO, Rob Lee, said, well, why don't you do it? We want to build this OT-CERT and we want you to come and build that. So we've talked a lot. The reason I'm bringing this up is we talked a lot about water and power and natural gas utilities, but manufacturing they have this different risk, but the same kind of risk with their small and medium suppliers in the supply chain. So I'm glad that you brought up supply chain.
To be clear, there are 16 critical infrastructures, and some of them are more dependent on OT than others. So it's beyond the water and gas and the traditional stuff that gets talked about. Would retail be affected?
Well, building automation systems, that's OT. So, that's how the Target hack happened years ago. The first really big attack was through their HVAC vendor. But that brings up an important point, actually. Service providers. So, a lot of these small and large, any company that has OT, they have service providers that come in, systems integrators, engineering firms, and they present a lot of risk that companies don't always think about. If you give them remote access into your facilities, which a lot of people do now since COVID, is it secure remote access or is it just remote access? Or if they walk in with a USB drive, where else has that USB drive been? When I started as CISO at Rockwell, we would have some field service engineers that would put everything they needed on a hard drive for the week. I'm going to 3 different customers. I'm loading it all on one hard drive, go into one customer. If they were infected, now that drive is infected, now I'm going to go to the next customer. So that was one of the things we did at Rockwell was put a lot of time into mitigating that risk. But a lot of systems integrators and engineering companies, they never even thought about it. And so they still have those kinds of practices. So we encourage people just to think about that. Like when you're working with a systems integrator, a service provider, make sure that they understand cybersecurity and If they don't know OT cybersecurity, then they should join OT-CERT.
So it's a question of not so much the specificity of OT, but just learning to recognize OT and its space.
It's kind of disconcerting to me sometimes, the large companies that have CISOs, that are really good CISOs, but they've never asked the question, who's responsible for securing our plants? And so, like at Dragos, we go into some prospective customers, and I'm just kind of like shocked that they haven't done anything yet to secure their plants. So CISOs out there need to understand, if you have an OT environment, you better ask who's responsible, because it might be you and you might not know it. Or you may think it's someone else, but they think it's you, and nobody really made that decision yet, but somebody has to be securing that OT environment.
So, of course, Dawn has some horror stories. We touched on one, but I was wondering if she had another.
This probably wouldn't be something that would come to mind when you think about an OT environment being impacted by ransomware and really serious results. The worst one that really touched my heart at Rockwell, because we'd have customers hit with ransomware that come to Rockwell and say, we need your help in recovering. Well, the worst one I ever saw was a dairy farm. And you might not think about a dairy farm, but think about, they have these automatic milking machines, and you have to milk those cows. And you have to milk them several times a day. And they had I think hundreds or thousands of cows. And they said, everything's down. They hit our OT. They hit those milking machines, and they hit the processing plant. So even if we could milk the cows, what are we going to do with all that milk? We have no plant to process it. We can't pour thousands or millions of gallons of milk into the streams, into the water supply. So these people were in a total panic. And it just struck me how companies like that, we don't think about agriculture. We don't think about the different companies that have OT, and they don't really think about it. They aren't thinking about security. They're thinking about milking cows. So to me, that's just the most interesting. And to me, it was just a heart-wrenching case where we felt like we really have to help these people as fast as we can. If you're making beer, you're making cookies, and you're hit, okay, that's bad. But here, just think of the poor cows.
So again, with the skills gap, how do we close that skills gap in OT?
Well, what I love in the community defense program is some of our customers are stepping forth and they're saying, I want to be a part of this. I want to help these small utilities. And so we're starting a community advisor program. We have one customer that's been sitting in, so for community defense, we have monthly sessions as well. And we work with, this is a little different because now you have the Dragos platform. You need to get it installed. You need to get it up and running. You see things on the dashboard. You need to figure out, what do I do about it? So we have a customer that's been participating in these monthly jumpstart sessions. And it's really rewarding for him. And he said, I know other Dragos customers that would love to be involved in this. And so it's kind of a fun way of putting the community in community defense. It's not just Dragos. Now it's Dragos customers that are going to help those small utilities to come up to speed. I think that's a really neat way to address that skills gap, to have the big companies helping those small companies directly. That's what we need.
So Dawn mentioned ISACs earlier, and I'm familiar with them. And oftentimes there's been a criticism that the corporate stuff doesn't get to carry over to the public as much as the public doesn't get to carry over to the private. So what has been Dawn's experience working with ISACs?
I think we're partnered with 9 different ISACs, OT-CERT is, because they recognize that we bring something that their members need, and it's education, it's resources, it's the how to do things. And they have the members that we need to reach. And so we're partnered with a bunch of different ISACs, and I love that relationship. As far as government working with the private sector, though, I have to say, like CISA has, DHS CISA has these cybersecurity advisors that are out in the field, local advisors in all of the regions across the U.S. And I have found them to be a wonderful resource for us because, like, after these water attacks that we've been seeing, our threat intel teams are looking out on the internet to see, hey, can we find other water utilities that are exposed the same way those ones were that were attacked and get to them before they're compromised. So we find information, but if we pick up the phone and call, some little water utility, they're going to think we're a scam. Just like, we know not to fall for those things. So we can't pick up the phone and call them, but we can talk to those CISA advisors that have relationships at the local level. They can contact them and say, hey, we wanted to disclose that you have this vulnerability and here's how to fix it. So that's just one example of where I'm finding the government, CISA in particular, to be really, it's a fun partnership for us to have. It's very rewarding to feel like, okay, look, we saved one.
Personally, I love what Chris Krebs and Jen Easterly have been doing with CISA. I want to hear, though, from Dawn's perspective of how it's working for them.
Well, just last summer, there were new vulnerabilities that the government found in Rockwell products, and they found that there were already exploits out there waiting to be used against those vulnerabilities. So they contacted Rockwell so that Rockwell could mitigate them, and then companies like ours were brought in so that we could reverse engineer the malware, see what it did, build that into our platform, do hunts through all of our customer data that we have access to, including Neighborhood Keeper, see if anyone has been compromised yet, and see who has the vulnerability so that as soon as it's disclosed, we can make sure that they go out and mitigate it. And so all of this behind the scenes work went on before that disclosure came out by Rockwell and CISA jointly. That, to me, is a huge game changer. I've never seen that kind of partnership in the past between the public and private sector. So I think that's a significant step forward for all of us.
I'm wondering if Dawn had any closing thoughts on OT security.
I would like to just ask that CISOs of large companies take this seriously, and they need to help to spread the word and to require that their suppliers start to build an OT cybersecurity program. They're already looking at them for IT security. They now need to spread that word about OT security. I think it's an obligation that we all have. We have to all raise that cybersecurity posture.
I'd like to thank Dawn Capelli for coming on the show and talking about the resources that are available to small utilities to help them fend off cyber attacks. We're all in this together. Hey, if you're enjoying Error Code, tell a friend. I'm sure there are other people out there who like narrative information security podcasts. And I'd really like to hear from you. Join us on Discord. Search for Error Code Podcast to join the server, or go to errorcodepodcast.com to get more details. And tell me what you like, and even what you don't. I have more conversations coming up. I'll have conversations about Secure by Design and more about Operation Volt Typhoon. Subscribe today. I don't want you to miss out.